The bright afternoon sun beat down on the abandoned factory district as Jamal Washington checked his homemade drone one last time. At 16, Jamal was already known around his Detroit neighborhood as the genius kid. His bedroom was filled with science trophies, and his garage had become a workshop where he built things most adults couldn't understand. Today, he was testing a new navigation system he had designed himself. He had chosen this empty industrial area because no one would bother him here. The concrete was cracked with weeds growing through, and most of the old buildings had broken windows. But it was quiet, and that was all Jamal needed. He launched, the drone watching with pride as it rose smoothly into the air. His fingers moved across the controller, guiding it through a series of test patterns. Everything was working perfectly. Then he heard it. A high-pitched whine, growing louder by the second. Jamal looked up, shielding his eyes against the sun. Something was falling from the sky, trailing smoke and fire. It wasn't a plane. It was smaller, more like a capsule. What in the world? Jamal whispered, quickly landing his drone and grabbing his backpack. Whatever was coming down, it was heading straight for the abandoned steel mill about 300 yards away. The object struck with a deafening crash. The ground shook beneath Jamal's feet. His first instinct was to run away, but then he thought about what his mom always said. We were put on this earth to help each other. If someone was inside that thing, they might need help. He ran toward the impact site, his heart pounding. Black smoke billowed into the sky. As he got closer, he could see it wasn't a meteorite or space junk. It was some kind of small spacecraft, like nothing he had ever seen before. The design was sleek and advanced, with no government or company markings. Jamal approached carefully. Part of the hull had cracked open and flames were spreading quickly. He heard a groan from inside. Someone was alive in there. Without hesitation, Jamal pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth and moved toward the opening. The heat was intense, making his eyes water. He peered inside and saw a man strapped to a seat, blood running down his face. The man was older, maybe in his 60s, wearing what looked like an expensive flight suit. "Hey, can you hear me?" Jamal called. "I'm going to get you out." The man's eyes fluttered open. They were pale blue and filled with pain. "Get away," he mumbled. "Not happening," Jamal replied, reaching for the harness release. The fire was getting worse. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the whole thing exploded. The harness was complicated, but Jamal's quick mind figured it out. As he worked, he noticed something strange about the damage to the craft. It didn't look like an accident. Some of the panels seemed to have been deliberately tampered with. Finally, the harness came loose. The man was heavy, but Jamal managed to drag him out of the wreckage. Just as they cleared the spacecraft, a secondary explosion sent them both tumbling to the ground. Jamal helped the man to a safe distance, then set him down gently against a concrete block. The stranger was clearly in bad shape. His breathing was labored and a nasty gash ran across his forehead. "What's your name, sir?" Jamal asked, pulling a water bottle and a small first aid kit from his backpack. The man stared at Jamal for a long moment, his expression changing from confusion to something darker. "Victor Harrington," he finally said, his voice weak but with an unmistakable note of authority. "Owner of Horizon Technologies." Jamal froze. Everyone knew that name. Victor Harrington was one of the richest men in the world, famous for pioneering private spaceflight. He was also infamous for his views on preserving cultural integrity in space colonies, which most people understood as code for keeping them white. You're that billionaire," Jamal said, his hands suddenly still. Victor's eyes narrowed. "And what are you doing here, boy?" The way he said boy made Jamal's stomach turn. But now wasn't the time for that. He opened his first aid kit and began cleaning the wound on Victor's head. "I'm helping you, Mr. Harrington. You crashed. Your ship looks like it was sabotaged." Victor tried to push Jamal's hand away, then winced in pain. "Don't touch me. Where's your phone? Call my security team." "No signal out here," Jamal replied calmly, continuing to tend the wound. "And you might have a concussion. You shouldn't move until help arrives." Victor muttered something under his breath, a slur that Jamal pretended not to hear. He had heard it all before, usually from people who didn't know him. Once they discovered he had won the state science fair 3 years running, they usually changed their tune. "Why would someone want to kill you?" Jamal asked, trying to keep the man talking and alert. Victor's eyes darted nervously around the abandoned industrial site. "You wouldn't understand. It's complicated. Corporate espionage." But Jamal could tell he was lying. There was real fear in those pale blue eyes. As Jamal finished bandaging Victor's head, he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Someone was watching them from the shadows of a nearby building. Then another figure appeared on the other side. "Mr. Harrington," Jamal whispered, "I think we have company." Victor turned to look, then grabbed Jamal's arm with surprising strength. "We need to leave, now." "But you're injured. Those aren't rescue workers," Victor hissed. "Those are the people who shot me down. They're here to finish the job." Jamal didn't waste time arguing. He helped Victor to his feet. The older man leaned heavily on him but managed to stand. "I know a place," Jamal said quietly. "This way." They had barely taken 3 steps when the first gunshot rang out. The bullet struck the concrete near their feet. Jamal didn't think. He acted. Wrapping Victor's arm around his shoulders, he half-carried the billionaire toward a small side door in one of the buildings. Behind them, voices shouted commands. More shots followed. Jamal pulled Victor through the door and slammed it shut. They were in what had once been an office area. Dust covered everything and the air smelled of mold and rust. "There's a tunnel system under these buildings," Jamal explained, guiding Victor toward a stairwell. "I found it months ago when I was exploring." Why are you helping me?" Victor asked, his breathing labored. "You know who I am. What I believe." Jamal met his eyes steadily. "Because right now you're just a person who needs help. And that's enough for me." For the first time, Victor seemed at a loss for words. Then the door behind them burst open, and there was no more time for talking. They descended into the darkness below, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. The underground tunnels were dark and cold. Water dripped from rusty pipes above, and their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Jamal used the flashlight on his phone to guide them through the maze. Victor stumbled along beside him, one hand pressed against the wall for support. "How much farther?" Victor asked. His voice was weaker now, and Jamal could tell the man was fighting to stay conscious. "Not far," Jamal said. "I have a place set up ahead, a kind of secret lab." Victor laughed weakly. "A secret lab? What are you, some kind of teen genius?" "Something like that," Jamal replied without boasting. He had learned long ago not to show off his intelligence. It made some people uncomfortable, especially coming from a kid who looked like him. They reached a heavy metal door. Jamal entered a code on a keypad he had installed himself, and the door clicked open. He helped Victor inside, then secured the door behind them. Light flooded the room as motion sensors detected their presence. Victor blinked in surprise. What had once been a forgotten maintenance room was now filled with computers, tools, and half-finished projects. Solar-powered batteries hummed quietly in one corner. Shelves lined the walls packed with books, electronic parts, and chemical supplies. A small medical area was set up near a couch that Jamal had salvaged from a dumpster. "What is this place?" Victor asked, looking around with new interest. "My workshop," Jamal explained, helping Victor to the couch. "The school science lab doesn't have what I need, and we can't afford this stuff at home, so I built my own." Victor stared at a complex circuit board on a nearby table. "You built that?" "It's for my drone navigation system," Jamal said. He grabbed a first aid kit from the medical area. This one was much better stocked than the small one he carried in his backpack. "Let me check your wounds properly now." Victor didn't protest this time as Jamal examined him. Besides the head wound, he had a cracked rib and several deep bruises. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but he needed a real doctor soon. "Those men who were chasing us," Jamal said as he worked. "Who are they?" Victor was quiet for so long that Jamal thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke. "They work for the Luna Consortium." "The space mining company?" "Yes." They think I have something that belongs to them. Victor's eyes darted to a small metal case attached to his belt that Jamal hadn't noticed before. And they're right. What's in the case? Jamal asked. Information. Dangerous information. Victor winced as Jamal applied antiseptic to a cut on his arm. I discovered something that could change everything we think we know about space exploration. Jamal finished bandaging Victor's arm and sat back. What kind of something? Victor studied Jamal's face, as if deciding whether he could trust him. Why are you helping me? You must know who I am, what people say about me. I know you support segregated space colonies, Jamal said directly. I know you've said things about people like me that weren't very nice, but right now that doesn't matter. You need help, and I can give it. Victor looked away. It's not that simple. My views, they're based on personal experience. Most prejudice is, Jamal replied. Doesn't make it right. To his surprise, Victor didn't argue. He just sighed deeply, looking suddenly older and more tired. Maybe not. But there are bigger issues at stake right now. He tapped the metal case. In here is proof that we're not alone in the universe. Jamal raised an eyebrow. Aliens? You're serious? Deadly serious. The Luna Consortium has been hiding evidence of non-human technology found on the far side of the moon. I have the proof right here. Victor coughed, then continued. They've been reverse engineering it for years, keeping the discoveries for themselves. But that's not the worst part. Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper even though they were alone. The technology is dangerous, it could be weaponized, and the consortium is planning to sell it to the highest bidder. Jamal wanted to be skeptical, but the fear in Victor's eyes seemed genuine. Before he could ask another question, a small alarm sounded from one of his computers. He rushed over to check it. They're in the tunnel system, Jamal said, looking at a screen that showed feeds from small cameras he had placed throughout the underground network. At least 4 men with guns. They must have found the entrance we used. Victor tried to stand but fell back, grimacing in pain. We need to move, now. You're in no condition to go anywhere, Jamal said firmly. And besides, they don't know about this room. The door looks like part of the wall from the outside. I designed it that way. Victor looked impressed despite himself. Smart. But they'll find us eventually. They have equipment, resources. Jamal thought quickly. Let me see what you have in that case. Maybe I can help figure out what we're dealing with. After a moment's hesitation, Victor handed over the metal case. Jamal opened it carefully. Inside was a small data drive and what looked like pieces of metal with strange flowing patterns etched into the surface. The drive contains all the evidence, Victor explained. The metal fragments are samples of the alien technology. They give off an unusual energy signature. Jamal examined the fragments with fascination. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. That's because it's not from Earth, Victor said. He watched as Jamal connected the data drive to one of his computers. You might not be able to access the files. They're heavily encrypted. Jamal smiled for the first time since their ordeal. Began. Encryption is a hobby of mine. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Victor watched in amazement as complex code filled the screen. Within minutes, Jamal had bypassed the security protocols and was scrolling through files. These are incredible, Jamal murmured, looking at images of strange artifacts and structures on the lunar surface. If this is real, it's real, Victor confirmed. I verified it myself before taking the evidence. On the security feed, the armed men were getting closer to their location. Jamal could see them methodically checking every inch of the tunnels. Need a plan, Jamal said, thinking out loud. We need to get this information to the right people before the consortium finds us. My private security team, Victor suggested. They're loyal to me. I just need to contact them. No phones work down here, Jamal said. I made sure of that for privacy, but his eyes lit up. I might have another way to communicate. He moved to a workbench and uncovered what looked like a complex radio system. I've been experimenting with quantum entanglement for secure communication. It's not perfect, but it might work. Victor stared at the young man with new respect. You built a quantum communication device in a basement? It was a challenge, Jamal said with a small shrug. Let me see if I can reach someone who can help us. As Jamal worked on the device, Victor watched him with growing curiosity. Who are you really, Jamal Washington? Jamal glanced up from his Quirka. Just a kid who likes science. No, Victor said slowly. You're much more than that. On the monitor, the armed men were now only 2 corridors away. Jamal worked quickly on his quantum communication device while Victor kept watch on the security monitors. The armed men were searching methodically, checking every crack in the walls, every possible hiding place. They're getting closer, Victor warned. His face was pale and sweat beaded on his forehead. The pain from his injuries was clearly getting worse. Almost done, Jamal replied. He connected the final wire and powered up the device. It hummed softly, a small green light blinking on its surface. I built this to talk to my friend Sam. He's at MIT now. If anyone can help us, it's him. Victor raised an eyebrow. Your friend at MIT knows how to deal with armed corporate mercenaries. His dad is FBI, Jamal explained. Cybercrime division. The device crackled with static. Jamal made several adjustments, and suddenly a voice came through. Jamal, is that you? Man, I told you this thing wouldn't work across state lines. Sam, listen, I don't have much time. I need you to contact your dad. It's an emergency. Jamal quickly explained the situation, keeping the details brief but clear. There was a long pause. Then Sam's voice returned, serious now. I'm calling him right now. He says stay put and keep your heads down. Help will come, but it might take an hour. We might not have an hour, Jamal said, looking at the monitors. The men were less than 50 feet away now. Then you need to move, Sam replied. Dad says if these guys are who you think they are, they have thermal imaging. They'll find you eventually. Jamal turned to Victor. Can you walk? Victor nodded grimly. If the alternative is getting shot, I can run a marathon. Good, because we need to leave now. Jamal disconnected the quantum device and grabbed a backpack. He quickly packed the alien fragments and data drive, along with some tools and a small first aid kit. There's another exit, he explained, moving to a corner of the room and pulling away a shelf to reveal a narrow passage. It leads to the old subway tunnels. We can use them to get across the city without being seen. Victor looked impressed. You've thought of everything. I like to be prepared. Jamal helped Victor to his feet. The tunnel is tight at first, but opens up after about 20 feet. Just as they were about to enter the passage, one of the armed men on the monitor stopped. He seemed to be looking directly at the hidden door to Jamal's lab. He found something, Victor whispered. The man on the screen pulled out a device and pointed it at the wall. He called his companions over. Thermal imaging, Jamal realized. They've detected our body heat. We need to go now. They entered the narrow passage just as pounding started on the lab door. Jamal pulled the shelf back into place behind them, then led Victor through the darkness, using his phone's flashlight to guide the way. The passage was rough and unfinished, little more than a crack in the foundation that Jamal had widened over time. Dust filled their lungs and cobwebs brushed their faces. Behind them, they heard the crash of the lab door being broken down. Finally, they emerged into a larger tunnel. Old subway tracks stretched in both directions, disappearing into darkness. The air was musty but easier to breathe. This way, Jamal said, turning left. There's a maintenance exit about half a mile ahead that comes up near the river. They moved as quickly as Victor's condition would allow. The billionaire was clearly in pain, but didn't complain. Every few minutes, Jamal checked behind them, but so far there was no sign of pursuit. They'll figure out where we went eventually, Victor said between labored breaths. They're professionals. By then, hopefully Sam's dad will have help on the way. Jamal slowed his pace slightly, noticing how Victor was struggling. Can I ask you something, Mr. Harrington? I think we're past formalities. Call me Victor. Okay, Victor. Why do you believe what you believe? About people being separated in space colonies? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Their footsteps echoed in the empty tunnel. "When I was a boy," he finally said, "my father worked at a research station in Africa. One night local militants attacked the station. They killed everyone except me. I hid under a desk and watched." He trailed off, his eyes distant with bad memories. "I'm sorry that happened to you," Jamal said quietly. "After that I decided that different groups of people should stay apart. It seemed safer." Victor glanced at Jamal. "But I'm starting to think I might have been wrong about some things." Before Jamal could respond, a sound echoed through the tunnel behind them. Voices. "They found the passage," Jamal whispered. He increased their pace, supporting more of Victor's weight. The maintenance exit was still a quarter-mile away. They wouldn't make it in time. "We need a different plan," Jamal said, looking around frantically. He spotted a small alcove where maintenance workers once took shelter when trains passed by. "In here." They squeezed into the alcove just as flashlight beams appeared in the distance behind them. "Now what?" Victor asked, his breathing shallow, from pain and exertion. Jamal's mind raced. "I have an idea, but you'll have to trust me." "I think we're past that point too," Victor said with a weak smile. Jamal pulled out his phone and opened an app he had created. "This controls my drones. The range isn't great, but I have one stored in a hiding spot not far from here." His fingers moved across the screen. "I've been experimenting with sound projection. If I can get the drone to the old station up ahead, I can make it sound like we went that way." Victor watched in amazement as the boy worked. "You built drones that can project sound?" "I was trying to create a system to help search and rescue teams," Jamal explained. "It can mimic human voices, footsteps, all kinds of sounds." On the screen, a small map showed the drone's position as it moved through a ventilation shaft toward the station. The voices behind them grew louder. Flashlight beams swept across the walls of the tunnel, coming closer by the second. "They're almost here," Victor whispered. "Just a few more seconds." The drone reached its position. Jamal tapped a command, and suddenly the sound of running footsteps echoed from far ahead in the tunnel. The voices behind them grew excited, and the flashlight beams moved more quickly, passing right by their hiding spot as the men ran toward the false sounds. Jamal waited until they were out of sight. "Come on. While they're distracted, we can double back and find another way out." They slipped out of the alcove and moved in the opposite direction from their pursuers. "That was brilliant," Victor said, looking at Jamal with new respect. "Sometimes the simplest tricks work best," Jamal replied. But inside he felt a small glow of pride. For the first time, Victor was seeing him as a person, not just a stereotype. They reached a junction where another tunnel crossed their path. Jamal checked his phone. "If we follow this one, we should reach a maintenance ladder that leads up to the street near the old library." Victor nodded, then suddenly stumbled. Jamal caught him before he could fall. "Sorry," Victor mumbled, getting a bit lightheaded. Jamal noticed fresh blood seeping through the bandage on Victor's head. "You need medical attention soon." "First, we need to get somewhere safe," Victor insisted. As they started down the new tunnel, Jamal's phone buzzed with a message from Sam. "Good news," Jamal said after reading it. "Help is on the way. Sam's dad has a team heading to our location." Victor managed to smile. "Looks like we might survive this after all." But as they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a woman in a black tactical suit, a gun pointed directly at them. The woman with the gun stared at them. She was tall with short brown hair and a scar along her jawline. Her eyes moved from Jamal to Victor, then back again. "Are you Harrington?" she asked, her voice surprisingly quiet. Victor stepped slightly in front of Jamal. "I am. The boy has nothing to do with this. Let him go." Jamal was shocked. Just hours ago, this man had looked at him with contempt. Now he was trying to protect him. The woman lowered her gun slightly. "I'm not with them. My name is Linda Powell. I used to work security for Horizon Technologies before I was fired for asking too many questions about the Luna Consortium." Victor studied her face. "I remember you. You filed a report about unusual shipping manifests to the lunar base." Linda nodded. "And a week later, I was escorted out of the building." She holstered her weapon. I've been investigating the consortium, on my own since then. When I heard chatter about an attack on your private spacecraft, I figured they finally decided you were a liability. How did you find us? Jamal asked suspiciously. I've been tracking their team. Linda gestured back the way they had come. They're professionals, but they're not subtle. And I know these old tunnels from my military days. A distant shout echoed down the tunnel. The men they had tricked were realizing their mistake. We need to move, Linda said urgently. I have a car waiting 2 blocks from here. Can you make it? Victor nodded, though he looked weaker than ever. Jamal supported him as they followed Linda through the tunnel to a rusty ladder. This leads to an alley behind the old public library, she explained, starting to climb. Stay close. They emerged into the fading evening light. The air felt wonderfully fresh after the musty tunnels. Linda led them quickly through back streets, avoiding main roads and security cameras. My contact at the FBI should have people in the area by now, Jamal said as they walked. Linda shook her head. The consortium has people in every agency. We can't trust anyone until we know who's clean. The boy's friend's father is FBI cybercrime, Victor said. If anyone can be trusted, it's them. They reached a black SUV parked in a narrow side street. Linda opened the back door. Get in, we need to get that head wound looked at. Once they were driving, Linda spoke again. What exactly do you have that they want so badly? Victor glanced at Jamal, who nodded slightly. They needed to trust someone, and Linda seemed like their best option. Evidence of non-human technology discovered on the moon, Victor explained. The consortium has been secretly mining it and developing weapons. Linda's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I knew it. The shipping manifests I flagged were listed as mineral samples, but the security protocols were extreme. Nothing like our normal procedures. Where are we going? Jamal asked. I have a safe house about an hour outside the city, Linda replied. We can regroup there and figure out our next move. As they drove through the city, Jamal carefully checked the data drive on his phone. The files were extensive. Photos, videos, scientific analyses, and communication logs. He found himself particularly interested in the material analysis of the alien fragments. This is amazing, he said quietly. According to these readings, the metal alloy doesn't match anything in our periodic table. It has properties that shouldn't be possible. Victor nodded. That's what first caught my attention. The consortium was reporting normal mining operations, but our research team was finding anomalies in the samples. When I started asking questions, people began disappearing or having accidents. So you stole the evidence, Linda concluded. I copied it, Victor corrected. I was planning to take it to international authorities, bypass our own corrupted agencies, but they caught on before I could get off planet. Jamal looked up from the phone. But there's something that doesn't make sense. These fragments give off a specific energy signature. According to the notes, it responds to certain radio frequencies. Why would alien technology react to Earth radio waves? Victor frowned. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. It wouldn't, Jamal said slowly, his mind racing. Unless? Linda glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Unless what? Unless it's not alien at all. Jamal scrolled through more files. What, if it's human technology? Advanced, yes, but from Earth? Victor shook his head. That's impossible. Nothing on Earth can create metal like this. Nothing we know about, Jamal corrected. He continued reading, muttering to himself as pieces began fitting together in his mind. Suddenly their car jerked violently as something slammed into them from behind. Linda cursed, fighting to maintain control of the vehicle. They found us, she shouted, accelerating hard. Hold on. A black van was right behind them, its front bumper dented from the impact. The driver rammed them again, sending their SUV skidding sideways. Linda was an expert driver. She recovered quickly and made a sharp turn down a narrow street. There's a gun in the glove compartment, she called back to them. Either of you know how to shoot? I do, Victor said grimly. He reached forward and took the weapon, checking. it with practiced hands. Jamal stared at him. You know how to use a gun? I grew up in dangerous places, Victor said simply. He rolled down his window as the van appeared behind them again. Linda weaved through traffic, trying to lose their pursuers. Jamal, call your FBI contact. Tell them where we are. Jamal made the call, giving their location and direction. They're 15 minutes out, he reported after hanging up. We might not have 15 minutes, Linda said as a second van appeared, ahead of them, blocking the road. She spun the wheel, taking them down an alley, but it was too narrow. Their side mirrors scraped against the brick wall, showering sparks. Dead end ahead, Jamal warned, spotting a chain-link fence blocking their path. Hold on! Linda accelerated instead of braking. They crashed through the fence, metal screeching, against the SUV's body. They emerged into an open area that looked like an abandoned construction site. Linda swerved around piles of gravel and cement blocks, but the vans were still in pursuit. Suddenly, one of the vans pulled alongside them. A man leaned out the window, pointing a gun. Get down! Victor shouted. He pushed Jamal flat against the seat just as the first shots rang out. Glass shattered as bullets hit their windows. Victor returned fire, forcing the gunman to duck back, inside. But they were surrounded now, the two vans working together to herd their SUV toward a half-finished building. I'm going to try to break through, Linda called back to them. When I do, you two run for that equipment shed. She pointed to a small metal structure about 50 yards away. I'll draw them off. We're not leaving you, Jamal protested. This isn't a debate, kid. Before they could argue further, Linda made her move. She slammed the brakes, causing one van to overshoot them, then accelerated hard in a new direction. The SUV bounced over rough ground, engines screaming with the effort. They reached the edge of the construction site. Just beyond was a road that might lead to safety, but as they approached, a third vehicle appeared, blocking their escape. This one was larger, more heavily armored. Military grade, Linda said, her voice tight with tension. These aren't just corporate mercenaries anymore. The armored vehicle's front section opened, revealing what looked like a cannon. That's not a gun, Jamal said, staring in horror. That's some kind of energy weapon. A blue light began gathering at the end of the cannon, and then Jamal understood everything. It's the technology from the moon, he whispered. They've already weaponized it.